Hello and welcome to the trade setup. In this video we are looking at Kratos defense and security solutions. It is time for another update, and today we will be discussing the failure to extend directly higher here from the area of support provided in the previous video, as well as the implications on the short and the larger time frame that come with it. Now before we get there, I would like to go quickly through the larger time frame for any of you who might be new, and here we are tracking a pretty basic ABC pattern to the downside, for which we don't necessarily have a too bearish of an outlook, but it does come with a relevant area of resistance, since on this chart we are on an all-time downtrend. Now in this case we can note that previously, for example, at the 38.2% retracement, we have gotten quite a serious rejection. Yeah, this is the first level of resistance that we can really track for this pattern to the downside, which, by the way, could easily extend into a larger ABC. Yeah, this internal ABC structure could be an A wave itself, and then we may get a wave B, and then another wave C to the downside. And it's not necessarily a particularly high probability, especially since it is only a three-wave structure, so we may have the opportunity to actually build something more bullish from this bottom, from this all-time low, which is exactly what we are tracking here. We do of course need to break the resistance levels, and so far, yeah, even into the 50% retracement we had a small rejection, but nothing too significant this time actually. And what we are tracking at this point is, well, kind of a mix, because we could still be tracking the idea of an impulse to be forming, but I'm telling you it is quite a fragile interpretation and it's not necessarily a high probability scenario. Fortunately for us, even without or outside of the impulse that we could be tracking, we have an identical or near identical area of support within this movement to the downside to look for further extensions higher. Now in this case we are looking at a wave 1 up here, and then a correction in an ABC pattern to the downside, or yeah, more of a sideways correction here. It is basically a running flat pattern, and this would be the bottom of the wave 2, and from here we are looking for the third wave to the upside, which, yeah, as I was mentioning, at this point it could even develop still as an impulse. Then what we were mostly focusing on was specifically this movement to the upside, which, yeah, ideally it is not over. I would like to still see further extensions within this pattern, but since we have gotten this more severe break, it is not a guarantee. Yeah, we could be seeing even further extension lower if we fail to hold the relevant area of support. Now it shouldn't be too much of a problem to hold somewhat of a support area and get at least a relief rally from this area that we will be tracking, but we should be prepared for not necessarily new highs directly. And again, even if we do get additional highs, it will not automatically be as part of this movement to the upside. We will need to be tracking that actively, because it is honestly quite a difficult chart right now. Yeah, ever since this failure to the downside, this failure to extend here in the third wave that we have here in Y to the upside, it has become a lot more difficult to actually track. Now, since we failed to hold this area of support and push directly higher, we need to do some adjustments here for it to still work out. It can still work out as an impulse, as I was mentioning, and for that I would need to consider this instead of a series of 1 2 1 2 1 2 setups and look for the third wave here. I would need to consider the third wave actually already complete in a 1 2 3 4th and a 5th. Yeah, this would be the only interpretation that I could still allow for an impulse to develop to the upside. In that case, yeah, we may even remove here this interpretation and we can track a 1 2, a third here, a fourth that would probably need to be as a triangle, and then a fifth wave that would already be formed. And in that case, we can even track an updated area of support between the $84 level all the way down to the $60.8 level. Now, if you remember, in the previous video, I already provided you a scenario which would have allowed a break below the white interpretation area of support, and that is what we were tracking in yellow, which is basically a larger wave C that could still extend higher in this area. Now again, even in this scenario, it is not necessarily a higher probability. It only allows the retracement here in the correction to go a little bit deeper. It allows all the way down to the $52.4 level, where in the white scenario we would need absolutely need to hold here the 50% retracement instead at the $60.7 level. Yeah, these areas of support track basically the same wave 4, within which we have quite an extended proportion already. Yeah, compared to this correction, this wave 2 is very small, right? We should normally see similar lengths in the correction. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, and at this point I could still allow it. We may even get here another low and maybe even another low, and it would still be fine as long as we don't get something like a larger wave A, then a wave B, and then a wave C to the downside. Yeah, this would be most likely outside of the interpretation possible for the count that we are tracking here to the upside. Now, there are even other implications that we could be tracking, that we could be discussing about, but this is what I believe we should be focusing on right now. Yeah, this correction that we can be tracking here within the wave 4. And in those scenarios, we are looking at an ABC pattern to be unfolding here at the moment, where, yeah, we have here the wave A bottom, the wave B top, and the wave C. In this wave C, we could easily still see further extensions to the downside, where so far, honestly, it is possible for me to consider a bottom in place. We don't necessarily or absolutely need additional lows, but I do need some confirmations for, or yeah, basically a signal that this correction has indeed bottomed. And well, for that I would need to first see a break here above the 61.8% retracement from a possible diagonal pattern developing in this area in a 1, 2, 3, 4th, and the 5th. Now we don't have the 61.8 as well. But yeah, this is the $80.6 level that we must see a break above for a signal that this movement to the downside is indeed complete. Now, we will be tracking this correction in orange because it does apply for both the white and the yellow interpretation. And in that case, we can now take it even into the shorter time frame, where even here we may see even further extensions. Now, I want to make it extremely clear. This area of resistance is the ultimate resistance for a signal that this movement would be done. It's not necessarily a preferred interpretation, but if I see here a break above the 61.8% retracement, I would be more confident to believe that this movement is done to the downside, and that, yeah, we are at least going into a large relief rally. And even if, yeah, for example, we push here to, let's say, this stop and then push back in, I wouldn't necessarily be looking directly for another low. I could easily see afterwards a large relief rally still extending higher. Yeah, this is an example of what we could see happening, where we aren't even necessarily looking for new highs within this area, yeah, new local high. But what I do want to see, and what I do have here in the shortest time frame, is still the likelihood of even an impulse developing to the downside at this point, where I may have a 1, 2, 1, 2 setup, yeah, something like this, a third wave down, fourth wave up, and then this would be a fifth wave to the downside, where basically I would still need a larger wave 4 and a fifth wave to be unfolding for me to see a completion within the wave C. It is not necessary. I already have divergences within this pattern to the downside, and from a larger time frame perspective, we could have already bottomed, but I do need to see from this time frame perspective a break even above those levels, which would be quite similar for what we have here in the orange area of support. Yeah, we would instead be looking only up to the $78 level instead, for which reason I won't even really be adding an additional area, because I believe it would just make it all that much more confusing. So we can still focus on this area of resistance for the larger count movement to the downside. And then from a shorter time frame, well, I could even look here even more so internally within this movement to the downside, where I don't have any evidence necessarily that this could not extend even lower, where I could argue that this is also actually, yeah, an impulse that could be unfolding in this area, where we may have something like a 1, 2, 3, 4th, and the 5th that could be done, and then we would need here a 1, 2, 3, 4th, and the 5th. Well, in that case, we may have even a smaller area of resistance, but as you notice, we have already broken above the 50% retracement here, which is a signal that this pattern to the downside would be done, and the only other resistance that I could even show in this area would be overlapping with what we have here in the shorter time frame for this 50% retracement. I have already checked it. I won't add it on the chart as well. So this allows us to look for only this larger consolidated area of resistance for further extensions to the downside that we have in orange. I wanted to go through all these scenarios internally, in smaller and smaller time frames to allow for a more complete view. But what we need to focus on right now is, for resistance, this orange area between the $70.4 all the way up to the $80.6, and for support, for the idea of an impulse, we can watch this area between the just the $84 level all the way down to the $60.7 level. And then for the idea of a diagonal pattern, we could allow a slightly even lower retracement down to the $52 level. But again, we would like to see a bottom forming here in the very near term, as it is with many other stocks, but we would like to see a bottom forming quite quickly for any of these scenarios that would still allow further extensions higher within the counts that we are actively tracking. And for now, these are the levels, this is the trade setup. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and let me know what else you want me to cover, and I'll do my best to do that in the days and weeks ahead. And until then, I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.